Chapter 13 Contact. The 18th day dawned in a furnace. Jim Whittaker cursed out loud at the sun before it appeared above the horizon. He had grown to hate the sun and the sea as though they had made a conscious choice to torture him. The flare cartridge made its way around to him with the morning's ration, a paltry inch of warm water in the bottom. It tasted awful and only served to remind him how thirsty he was. By noon the daily chorus of delirium rose from the rafts. There was random shouting and parched voices. Someone sang a line of an unrecognizable song before tailing off. Everyone took turns talking to people who weren't there. Whittaker had been carrying on a running conversation with Davy Jones, the mythical evil spirit in the sea. Today he heard a new voice, one that left him shaken and scared. It was his son, Tom. He was sure of it. Tom had been training for the Navy in California when they left 2.5 weeks ago. "What are you doing out here, Tom?" he asked, speaking into the air. "When did you leave San Francisco?" His son's voice replied, "I was sent to sea over 2 weeks ago, Dad. You see, we were sunk, and seeing I was out here, I thought I'd just drop in and see how you were getting along." Whittaker called out to him and called out again, but the voice was gone. He settled back into the raft, wondering if his son could be dead and speaking to him from beyond the grave. He was still agonizing over the thought when he saw Bill Cherry sit up straight in the raft. Cherry's eyes looked wild in their bony sockets. "I hear an engine," he yelled. "Hear it?" Whittaker looked around at the gaunt faces of his raft mates. No one, with the possible exception of Rickenbacker, believed it was anything but a hallucination. Another moment passed in silence. Suddenly, 7 men sat bolt upright, staring into the sky. There was no mistaking it. A low, muffled roar in the distance, unlike any sound made by the sea or sky. Cherry and Rickenbacker saw the plane first, emerging from a cloud bank about 5 miles to the west. It looked like it was headed straight for the rafts. Bartok thought it was American, a Navy Kingfisher with pontoons and a single engine. But at this point, no one cared if it was Emperor Tojo of Japan himself. They yelled as loud as they could. Cherry flapped his undershirt sail in the air. Bartok somehow found the strength to stand. He waved his arms wildly while Rickenbacker held him by the waist. Whittaker's first instinct was to reach for the flares. Then he realized they were long gone. In the next instant, he knew that without them, the rafts were completely invisible to the plane that far away. The plane teased them for a couple of minutes before disappearing into the clouds 3 miles off. The promising hum of the engine faded seconds later, and with it went every shred of hope. The men collapsed, exhausted from the effort. They sat in silence, throats burning, spirits crushed. They had been out here 18 days without a single sign that other people inhabited the globe. Now, a pilot had entered their world and left just as quickly, with no idea they existed. How could they possibly make it till they got another chance? DeAngelis and Bartek had been drinking salt water, just like Alex had before he died. Reynolds was a human skeleton. He looked like he wouldn't make it another day. It felt to Whittaker like the cruelest moment of the whole ordeal, to have the promise of rescue dangled nearly within reach, and then snatched away. Rickenbacker let them stew in despair for a couple minutes, while he gathered his strength. Then he launched into another lecture. That plane, he said, meant they had drifted within range of a base. If that was true, they were moving in the right direction and would keep drifting closer. That meant there would be more planes and more chances to be seen. A man, he told the crew, would have the courage, the patience, and the faith to swallow his disappointment, hang on, and wait. And so they did. The next morning another plane appeared, and yet another in the afternoon. Each time the scene from the day before repeated itself. Stick figure arms waved in the air. Ruined voices shouted into the sky. The plane disappeared. The men collapsed. Rickenbacker growled at his raft mates until they wanted to survive, if for no other reason than to see him put in his grave. The following day, their 20th at sea, Rickenbacker was sitting listlessly in the sun when he heard voices arguing. DeAngelis was now alone in the small raft, and Cherry was asking him to trade places. "Why?" DeAngelis asked. "I'm going to try and make land," Cherry said. "Staying together's no good. They'll never see us this way." Rickenbacker couldn't believe Cherry wanted to go off on his own again. It had been 2 days since they first saw the planes, and the men felt like the time was running out. But splitting up could mean death for all of them, and Rickenbacker let Cherry know it. If the planes couldn't see all 3 rafts bunched together, how were they going to catch sight of one? And how would Cherry know which way to row? The planes had come from all directions of the compass. There was land somewhere nearby, but no one knew where it was. Cherry and Rickenbacker argued back and forth, locked in another power struggle. Finally, Cherry put an end to it. "I was captain and commanding officer of the plane," he insisted. "I am the commanding officer of this party. I'm leaving." DeAngelis paddled up to Cherry's raft. The two men switched planes, and Cherry rode off in the Donut. The rest of the crew watched as their captain drifted away on the waves. The co-pilot and the navigator weren't far behind. Before Cherry disappeared over the horizon, Whitaker and DeAngelis announced that they were leaving too. Rickenbacker was furious now. He did not want to be left alone with Adamson and Bartek, both of whom were so weak they could barely lift their heads. "What about Reynolds?" he said. "You haven't asked him." Reynolds was too far gone to ask. Whitaker didn't bother to argue with Rickenbacker. He untied his line and dropped it in the ocean. The three rafts, together for nearly 3 weeks, gradually drifted apart.